A childhood shattered. Emily Carter's earliest memories were not of carefree summer days or the scent of fresh-baked cookies in the family kitchen. Hers belonged to a different world entirely. She grew up in the imposing shadows of the Carter estate, a mansion perched on the outskirts of Boston, surrounded by sprawling lawns and old oak trees, where tradition and reputation mattered more than love. The day everything changed was quiet and cold. Emily was curled up on the second-floor landing, clutching her favorite teddy bear, listening as muffled voices rose from below. Her mother, Linda, once the gentle center of her universe, was pleading with Emily's grandmother, Agnes, a woman whose icy eyes and sharp voice could silence a room. Emily didn't understand every word, but the pain was unmistakable. Accusations hung heavily in the air. Blame for choices Linda had made, whispered resentments, and, worst of all, a final resolute command that they had worn out their welcome. Emily watched as her mother, shoulders trembling, packed a single suitcase. The staff averted their eyes. Her father, always absent, was nowhere to be found. Agnes stood tall, her tone leaving no room for argument, while the rest of the family pretended it wasn't happening. No one defended them. In a storm of shame and heartbreak, Linda gripped Emily's small hand, and together they walked down the long marble hallway, past family portraits filled with faces that seemed to look right through them. As the car pulled away, Emily pressed her face to the window, feeling the finality of exile. At 10 years old, she gazed back at the towering mansion that was never truly home, trying to memorize every detail she would never see again. That moment etched a permanent wound inside her. Each birthday afterward, every milestone, was marked not by celebration, but by absence, a constant reminder that she and her mother had become invisible to those they once trusted most. Emily grew up acutely aware of injustice, determined never to let the coldness of her childhood define her fate. The pain she witnessed in her mother, the quiet resolve, the silent tears late at night, became both a scar and a source of strength that would shape the woman she would ultimately become. Growing up in hardship, life in Brooklyn was nothing like the privileged world Emily Carter had known. The luxury of manicured lawns and marble hallways was replaced by the hum of city traffic in the cramped quarters of a modest apartment above a bustling street. The transition was jarring. Emily remembered the echo of their footsteps as they first climbed the narrow, creaking stairs, carrying the few belongings they were able to salvage. Her mother, Linda, wore two bright smiles designed to hide the pain in her eyes. From that day forward, every dollar mattered. Emily grew up learning to stretch every penny, watching her mother juggle a dizzying array of jobs, cleaning houses in the early morning, waiting tables through the afternoon, and sometimes sewing late into the night by the flickering light of an old desk lamp. Linda never complained. In fact, she greeted Emily each morning with encouragement and gentle reminders that dignity was not measured by material wealth. School was both an escape and a challenge. Emily envied her classmates' carefree laughter and new shoes, luxuries her mother could never afford. Yet she worked harder than any of them, driven by a fierce sense of purpose. She often sat at the kitchen table long after midnight,
I was at home,
textbooks
alone.
spread wide, determined to prove that the world would not defeat her or her mother. Outside, the neighborhood was tough and unyielding. Emily quickly learned to be vigilant, to read the tension on the sidewalks and the weariness in neighbors' eyes. But she also found unexpected kindness. The elderly woman downstairs who slipped her cookies, the bookstore owner who let her browse for hours on cold winter days. These small mercies formed a patchwork of hope, guiding Emily through the darkest times. Despite their hardships, Linda instilled in her daughter an unshakable belief in self-worth. She never spoke ill of the Carters or the life they'd lost. Instead, reminding Emily that compassion and resilience were greater treasures than inherited fortune. At night, the two would sit by their tiny kitchen window, sharing stories and dreams, the city lights flickering in the distance. It was in those moments, so far from the gilded halls of her childhood, that Emily's determination truly formed. She would rise, not just for herself, but for the woman who had sacrificed everything for her. A resolve for revenge. As Emily Carter navigated her teenage years amid the relentless pace of Brooklyn, something fierce and unwavering crystallized inside her. A vow to never again be made powerless. The injustice she witnessed as a child, the callous exile from her family, the silent suffering of her mother, became a driving force that shaped every ambition, every choice. It was more than anger. It was a promise to herself and to her mother that they would not remain victims of the Carter family's prejudice and pride. The birth of an ambition. While classmates obsessed over prom dresses and social media, Emily's world revolved around goals she kept hidden from everyone but herself. In the flickering glow of the kitchen lamp, she mapped out her future with determined precision. She devoured books on business, psychology, and law, often borrowing them from the tiny library down the street. She kept a notebook, her manifesto, as she privately called it, where she scribbled ideas, action plans, and reminders of why she had to succeed. Emily's drive was never fueled purely by spite. She was aware that unchecked revenge could be corrosive, turning her into the very kind of person she resented. But justice, as she defined it, meant restoring dignity to her mother, reclaiming the place that was rightfully theirs, and ensuring no one else would suffer the same callousness. Her pain found its outlet not through self-destruction, but in disciplined, focused ambition. Education, her weapon of choice. Getting into college became her escape hatch, her first real shot at controlling her destiny. New York universities were stepping stones, chlorinated in their diversity and ambition, places where reinvention was not only possible, but celebrated. Emily threw herself into her studies at NYU, majoring in business administration with a minor in strategic communications. She remembered every undermining word spoken by her grandmother, every moment of humiliation, and funneled them into hours spent perfecting her essays, outmaneuvering her peers in heated debates, and networking with professors who recognized her talent. Despite her modest means, Emily made it a point to dress sharply and present herself with quiet authority. She sought out internships at consulting firms, luxury hotels, and real estate companies, working twice as hard as anyone around her. Nights were restless. Sometimes dreams of marble hallways haunted her sleep. Other times, they inspired meticulously detailed plans. She refused to allow the city or the Carter name to dictate her fate. Building a new identity. It was in New York, amidst its frenetic mixing of accents and dreams, that Emily began to build a new identity. One not marked by her expulsion from the Carter estate, but by her own resilience and strategic brilliance. She carefully crafted her public persona, poised, sharp, and impeccable. Her reputation grew in academic circles and eventually in the business world when, still in her early 20s, she launched a consulting startup specializing in organizational turnarounds. Her first clients were local restaurants and small hotels struggling to stay afloat. Emily's analytical mind and emotional intelligence proved invaluable. She had a knack for reading power dynamics in rooms, identifying unspoken resentments and weaknesses, She knew how to disarm egos without surrendering her own. People began to talk. There was something relentless, almost magnetic, about the young woman who arrived at every meeting, meticulously prepared, and left nothing to chance. What they didn't see was the emotional labor behind Emily's calm. She replayed memories from her childhood, like training exercises, dissecting each encounter until she could understand every angle. Who benefited, who looked away, who spoke up, and why. Each lesson became a chess move, each scar a warning never to underestimate an opponent or let down her guard. The network of allies. Emily understood that revenge executed alone is a doomed proposition.
It is finished.
Quietly, she assembled a network of allies, professors who valued her insight, mentors from the business world, and ambitious fellow students who admired her work ethic. Some were drawn by her determination, others by her candor. A few, like her roommate Leah, saw beyond her surface. "You work like you're chasing something impossible," Leah once remarked over coffee. Emily only smiled, unwilling to reveal the storm inside her, but grateful for the companionship that kept her grounded. She volunteered for alumni events, mingled at charity galas, and met influential figures from industries connected to her family's empire. There was a certain satisfaction in knowing she was gaining access to the very world that had once shut its doors in her face. But this time, on merit, not privilege, setting her plan in motion. In her final year at university, an opportunity presented itself. A high-profile internship at an international hotel conglomerate, one that happened to partner with Carter Holdings, the crown jewel of her family's wealth. Emily recognized it as fate's invitation. She approached it with nerves of steel, never once letting on that she was anything more than a fiercely capable young consultant. During her internship, Emily proved indispensable. She identified operational leaks, refocused team structures, and pitched proposals that caught the attention of decision-makers. Her name started appearing in industry newsletters. Her face, at networking events, discreetly but unmistakably stood out. All the while, she gathered intelligence about the Carter business dealings, taking note of new vulnerabilities, declining portfolios, and fractures in the once unshakable family foundation. Emily knew her moment was coming. Behind her poker face, she was preparing to re-enter the world of the Carters, not as a prodigal granddaughter begging for validation, but as a force to be reckoned with, torn between justice and vengeance. And yet, in the privacy of her apartment, Emily sometimes battled her conscience. She wondered if, by plotting revenge, she risked becoming like the Carters themselves, cold, calculating, and indifferent to collateral damage. Those were the nights when she'd find her mother softly humming in the kitchen, fixing tea for them both. In those moments, Emily remembered that her ultimate goal was not simply to wound those who hurt her, but to restore the dignity that was stolen from her mother, and perhaps even to heal herself. The tipping point, graduation, came with a flurry of well wishes and prestigious job offers. Emily, however, had bigger plans. She reinvested her savings in her fledgling consulting firm, growing it into a boutique agency that soon caught the attention of major hotel chains across the country, including, eventually, Carter Holdings itself. This was the culmination of all her pain and preparation. 15 years after being forced out, Emily would return to the Carter empire, not as a victim, but as a strategic partner, capable of turning their fortune and their legacy on its head. The resolve for revenge had become her compass, propelling her toward the reclamation of everything she and her mother had lost. And, in the process, Emily was no longer just Linda's daughter. Or the abandoned Carter? She was a woman who commanded every room she entered, ready for the reckoning to come. Turning the tables, the conference room was all glass, gleaming metal, and hushed power, just the sort of place where fortunes pivot and the fate of family dynasties is quietly rewritten. It was here, after 15 years of absence, that Emily Carter made her return, not as a supplicant, but as a storm in a sharp suit. Her journey had been long, shaped by hardship and a relentless pursuit of both justice and a future on her own terms. And now the game board was finally set. A surprising reunion. Emily's reappearance in the Carter family sphere was as audacious as it was calculated. For years, the Carters had become insulated, their business empire running on old principles and older grudges. When a rising business consultant by the name of Emily J. Carter was announced as the strategic partner and lead negotiator for a major hotel redevelopment, heads turned. Few recognized her. Gone were the soft features of a little girl, replaced by a woman with composed charisma and razor-sharp intellect. The boardroom was packed for her first meeting with Carter Holdings. Her grandmother, Agnes, still presided at the head with her iconic, icy composure. There were aunts and uncles Emily barely remembered, cousins grown into strangers, lawyers and board members, all sizing up the new player. Yet, it was Emily who held the air of quiet command as she flicked through slides and took questions, her voice unwavering, her gaze meeting every challenge without flinching. Strategic power moves. Emily knew that a direct confrontation, storming and demanding vengeance, would fail before it began. Instead, she worked her magic through data, analytics, and a deep understanding of the hotel market. Her presentations revealed holes in the family's portfolio, underperforming assets, missed market trends, costly inefficiencies. She never accused, she demonstrated. She never pleaded, she persuaded. Her solutions were bold but realistic, cutting through old allegiances to propose restructuring initiatives and new investments that would modernize Carter Holdings while quietly shifting power away from those who once exiled her and her mother. Perhaps the most potent card Emily played was her network. Trusted colleagues from her consulting firm and allies she had built over the years filled key advisory roles. At every turn, she backed her proposals with testimonials from industry leaders who had no idea of her family's past, only of her formidable skill. Board members who had grown complacent found themselves suddenly exposed, responsible for long-ignored problems. Those who respected competence gravitated to Emily, forming a new coalition of progressives within the old guard. Even Agnes, slow to acknowledge the shift, found herself listening more than talking. The human toll. But the boardroom was only half the battleground. Outside of meetings, Emily's presence rippled through the Carter family's private life. Dinner invitations came with awkward pleasantries, coded inquiries about her background, veiled attempts at reconciliation. Some relatives, perhaps feeling guilt, tried to reconnect. Others eyed her as an upstart, interfering with the natural order. Emily navigated these moments with rigid professionalism, never letting down her guard. She remembered nights spent hungry while her relatives dined in splendor, holidays marked by absence, and the weight of seeing her mother's optimism slowly wane as years slipped by in Brooklyn. Yet, there was a complex satisfaction in outmaneuvering those who expected her to fail. Every success for her firm, every headline mentioning Emily Carter, the visionary consultant, was both victory and vindication. Forcing accountability, it became clear as weeks passed that Emily was not simply making recommendations. She was redirecting the very path of Carter Holdings. One by one, poor management practices were spotlighted, and those responsible were called to answer not to accusations, but to cold, irrefutable numbers. Some resisted, belittling her as an outsider. But more and more, her sheer results silenced them. A key breakthrough came when Emily's team uncovered evidence of financial improprieties. A longtime executive had been quietly siphoning resources, leading to cascading losses. Rather than publicly humiliating anyone, Emily orchestrated a private, no-nonsense intervention, handing Agnes the facts and a suggested course of action. It was a moment of reckoning for the matriarch, who had always thrived on secrets, but found herself cornered by the truth and Emily's insistence on transparency and integrity. Testing old loyalties, the family was now divided. Some rallied to Emily's competence and results, believing her approach could save the business from obsolescence. Others resented her, their insecurities laid bare, as she steadily reshaped the company's future and forced them to confront the legacy of secrecy and exclusion that had characterized their reign for so long. The real test, however, was more personal than professional. One night, Agnes summoned Emily to her imposing office overlooking the Boston skyline. What followed was not an argument, but a measured discussion. Agnes, formidable but aging, quietly asked why Emily had returned. Emily met her gaze, and for the first time told the truth, not of vengeance or bitterness, but of a longing to restore what was lost, for her mother and for herself, and to prove that resilience could triumph over cruelty. Agnes did not apologize. She rarely did, but in her silence, Emily understood that she had forced recognition where none had existed before. Victory, without cruelty. Emily never sought to destroy the Carter family, only to ensure that it could never again dictate her fate, or her mother's. She insisted in changes not out of revenge, but to build something lasting and fair. She advocated for new codes of conduct, inclusive hiring, and support for charity projects that reflected the values she and her mother had lived by in Brooklyn. What truly turned the tables was not Emily's strategic genius alone, but her refusal to become as cold and merciless as those who had hurt her. She offered forgiveness without forgetting, opportunities for reconciliation, and always held the door open for true change within the family she no longer needed, but could now shape. A quiet triumph. By the end of the fiscal year, Carter Holdings posted its strongest growth numbers in decades. Business journals credited unorthodox new leadership and outside-the-box thinking, never realizing that the visionary at the helm had once been cast out by the very dynasty she'd now revived. Emily stood at the center of this rebirth, not as a pawn playing out an old grudge, but as a queen on her own chessboard. Her mother, Linda, remained in Brooklyn, forever proud, but never fully healed. Emily knew that what they had won was more than wealth. It was a new order built on merit, respect, and the kind of justice that echoes across generations. Emily Carter had not just turned the tables, she had remade the board to finally belong to herself. The tense confrontation. The Carter boardroom had witnessed its share of power struggles, but none quite like this one. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off polished wood and steel. Every seat was filled, but the air was heavier than usual. It crackled with anticipation, loaded with decades of secrets and the palpable weight of old wounds. For the first time in years, every member of the Carter dynasty was present, from distant cousins in tailored suits to senior board advisors whose loyalties had survived generations.
the way it
At
has
the
to
far
be.
end sat Agnes Carter, the family matriarch,
Sure?
her posture upright, eyes steely. Every inch the formidable woman who once ruled the estate with an uncompromising fist. All the old guard were there, summoned by Emily's latest proposal, though none could admit, even to themselves, that they had come as much for the spectacle as for the meeting. They sensed an upheaval in the works. The whispers in the corridors said that things would never be the same again. Emily Carter entered quietly, her stride purposeful and measured. She dressed for this moment. Navy suit, crisp white shirt, gold cufflinks. She could feel the cold appraisal in every glance, the half-concealed skepticism and even envy. But Emily had learned long ago how to transform vulnerability into composure, pain into power. Today, she was not the little girl banished by her grandmother. She was the architect of this high-stakes confrontation, one she had orchestrated with relentless forethought. Setting the stage, the agenda for the meeting was clear on paper. Discuss the proposed merger with a major international hotel group, an opportunity Emily herself had attracted and managed. But beneath the bullet points lay unspoken stakes. This was a crossroads for Carter Holdings. Either they evolved or they faded into irrelevance. As the lead presenter, Emily stood at the head of the table, her every word and gesture projected onto a wall of digital screens. Her presentation was clinical, insightful, exposing inefficiencies, missed opportunities, and alarming discrepancies in the company's recent performance. She drove each point home with carefully chosen data, never raising her voice, but giving no room for dispute. For a moment, her authority seemed absolute, until a chilly interruption cut through the silence. The first volley, it was Gregory Carter, Agnes's eldest son, and the family's traditionalist enforcer.
Yeah.
And how do we know your
Teddy's
plan
dead.
doesn't risk the Carter legacy, Emily? Weren't you absent when decisions had to be made? Blood runs deep in this boardroom, and memory even deeper.
Too much.
Emily held his gaze. If memory serves, I was shut out, not absent, she replied, her voice calm but unyielding. I've built my career on results, not on nostalgia. The world is changing with or without us. I propose we change with it. Or we can watch others claim what should be ours. A murmur rippled around the table. This wasn't just a debate about quarterly earnings. It was a public reckoning, with the ghosts of family history front and center. Old resentments, surface cousins who had barely spoken in years, were suddenly emboldened. Some defended Emily, impressed by her accomplishments and the fresh energy she brought. Others scoffed at her boldness, muttering that she was just here for retribution. Agnes watched it play out, her expression unreadable, her fingers laced tightly together. The conversation shifted from spreadsheets to scars. Accusations surfaced, not just about management, but about the night Linda and Emily were exiled. This company lost more than money the day Linda walked out, a soft-spoken uncle finally admitted, echoing the pain that had always simmered beneath the family's surface. Emily paused, her features softening despite herself. My mother never wanted revenge. She wanted dignity. I am here because the Carters need both. Dignity for people
It's been a long
and
time.
accountability for the company.
Yes, it has.
I won't let history repeat itself. Agnes's ultimatum. At last, Agnes spoke. Her voice was lower than it once was, but carried the same gravity. You come to us as a businesswoman, Emily, but your wounds are still family wounds. What assurance do we have that you won't use your new influence to dismantle what I spent my life building? Emily met her without flinching. I don't want to destroy the Carters. I want to save what's worth saving. I want to build a company and a family where no one is disposable. That's something this board has never understood. A long silence followed. It was clear this was the point of no return. Personal stakes collide. The atmosphere turned raw as other family members chimed in.
My new car.
Tired of old debts and double standards. Sides formed, those ready for reform and those desperate to cling to tradition. Emily saw the toll in their eyes. The cousins who had wanted to reach out in childhood but never did. The aunts who sent secret Christmas cards. The uncles whose silence was their only protest. The confrontation wasn't just professional. It was profoundly personal. Emily found herself defending not only her ideas, but her mother, her younger self, and all those invisible sacrifices that had never made the balance sheets. She brought out copies of anonymous staff surveys, testimonials from hotel partners, letters from former employees whose lives had been quietly improved by her mother Linda's kindness decades ago. "This is what legacy is," she said steadily. "Not marble halls or board appointments, but the mark you make on people's lives." A crack in the ice. For the first time, doubt flickered in Agnes's eyes. The matriarch looked around the table and saw not just colleagues in business, but tired family, each carrying their own glimmers of regret. The confrontation had transformed. It was not just about power, but about healing, if such a thing was possible in a family whose wounds had always gone unspoken. Resolution, but not reconciliation. The board voted. Emily's plan passed, but narrowly. Several of Agnes's allies abstained, unwilling to oppose the tide, but not ready to celebrate Emily's victory. Emily knew this wasn't a storybook triumph, nor did she smile as hands shook or contracts were signed. Instead, after the meeting, Emily found herself standing alone at the edge of the conference room. Sunlight catching the tears, she quickly brushed away. Agnes paused beside her. "Pain is persistent," the old woman said quietly. "So is blood. Where you take us next will decide which is stronger." Emily nodded, her jaw set, heart pounding. The battle had ended, but the war for respect, for justice, for the possibility of real forgiveness was far from over. Aftermath. As the family dispersed and the boardroom emptied, Emily felt the exhaustion sink deep into her bones. But beneath the weariness was a fierce new clarity. She had confronted the Carter dynasty head-on and survived. She had demanded not just business innovation, but human dignity. In winning the board's vote, she saw a glimmer of hope for the future. The smallest sign that the cycle could be broken. Outside, Manhattan thundered beneath the October sun, hopeful and unforgiving as ever. For the first time, Emily allowed herself a breath of relief. Perhaps this was what true victory felt like. Not in crushing her enemies, but in refusing to become them. The conflict between family bonds and justice. Despite the brilliant victory in the Carter boardroom, Emily Carter soon discovered that her triumph was not the end of the journey. Rather, it marked the beginning of an even more complicated battle within herself. Night after night, long after the conference room doors had closed and the echoes of debate had faded, Emily found sleep elusive. Lingering in the silence of her apartment, she would stare at the city lights flickering beyond her window, haunted by questions bigger than any business merger or power struggle, wrestling with conscience. On paper, justice had been served. She had demanded accountability, brought transparency to a place thick with secrets, and forced her family's hand toward ethics and change. But the taste of justice was tinged with bitterness. Had her relentless pursuit crossed the thin line from righteousness into vengeance? Had she caused wounds that could never heal, even as she had tried to mend her own? Old memories rose unbidden. Her grandmother's stony silence, her mother's tears on a cold night in Boston, the day they left with only a suitcase and each other. The pain was raw as ever, but now it mingled with guilt. Emily questioned if her victories came at too high a cost, not just to her adversaries, but to herself and those who, however flawed, still bore her blood. Compassion wears a new face. Emily thought often of her mother Linda, who had always believed that dignity meant kindness and power demanded humility. Throughout the storm, Linda had never encouraged hatred, only self-respect and resilience. Emily replayed the soft conversations they shared at their tiny Brooklyn kitchen table. Her mother's unwavering faith that people could change. Her belief that the heart must guide the hand. Now, as Emily sat with bank statements and legal documents spread before her, memories of her mother's philosophy warred with the iron logic that had fueled her ascent. Could she demand justice and still honor the bonds of family? Or did her drive to correct old wrongs risk turning her into the very force that had once exiled her? A force that saw only enemies and not people. The family phrase, at the edges. In the months following the confrontation, the Carter family no longer functioned as it once had. Some relatives viewed Emily with a new respect, even admiration. Others retreated, wounded by the exposure of old grievances. Every gathering felt tense, small talk brittle, laughter forced. Her presence was a reminder of uncomfortable truths. Her name synonymous with a reckoning few had truly wanted. Behind closed doors, alliances shifted. Some cousins reached out on quiet evenings, confiding their shame for not defending Emily and Linda years ago. Aunts dropped off handwritten notes, torn between pride and regret. But there was resistance, too. Whispered accusations that Emily had betrayed her own for the sake of reputation and revenge. All the while, Agnes, the matriarch, kept her distance, her formidable will weakened only by the knowledge that she had lost her iron grip on the family. She had ruled for so long. Emily saw her grandmother less as a villain now, and more as a woman holding desperately onto legacy, afraid to admit the pain she herself had caused. Haunted by unanswered questions. The more Emily advanced professionally, the more haunted she became in the quiet spaces between meetings. Was justice truly just if it left a family in ruins? Could dignity be won for her mother if it meant others, however imperfect, lost their own? Each time she reviewed new policies or charted a future for Carter Holdings, she weighed the price of every decision, feeling the burden of her lineage and the pain of her personal crusade. Her dreams became restless, filled with images of both the marble halls of her childhood and the cramped Brooklyn apartment where she and Linda had rebuilt their lives. In those dreams, voices from the past argued with voices of the present. Linda's reassurances, Agnes's commands, the quiet disappointment of uncles, and the whispered encouragement of newfound friends. Emily sometimes woke in tears, caught between the fear of becoming coldly pragmatic and the fear of being too soft to protect what mattered. Seeking a middle path, one evening, unable to rest, Emily called her mother. Linda's voice, gentle as ever, soothed her more than any therapist or confidant could. You did right, Emily, but life, especially family, never gives you perfect victories. Let justice be your compass, but don't forget your heart. The world hurts enough. Try not to add to it. Her mother's words planted a seed of possibility. Perhaps she could rebuild, not by forgetting the harm done, but by fostering the changes she'd made. Emily resolved to reach out, not just to enforce policies, but to mend relationships wherever opportunity allowed. She began hosting open forums for Carter family employees, inviting honest conversation. She sought opportunities to include even those relatives who continued to resist her, offering olive branches without sacrificing principle. Balancing the scales, Emily realized that true justice was not about erasing the past, but about creating new opportunities for forgiveness, dignity, and connection. She encouraged a broader company culture that gave employees, including family members who worked at Carter Holdings, a voice. Anonymous surveys were collected, mentorship programs launched, diversity and inclusion committees formed. For her relatives estranged by old resentments, she extended invitations to collaborate or volunteer in family-sponsored community projects. Small victories, one cousin joining a charity board, an aunt taking charge of an educational initiative, began to slowly patch the rift, even if true reconciliation remained distant. A different strength. Emily no longer measured her success solely in profit or accolades, but in the way people responded to her leadership. When grievances surfaced, she addressed them with transparency and, when needed, empathy. Where she had once wanted only victory and vindication, she found herself craving acceptance, not as a prodigal daughter or avenging angel, but as a woman forging a future where neither blood nor justice demanded a sacrifice from the other. The unending journey. Still, some nights remained sleepless. The wounds of her childhood were not easily sealed, nor could every relationship be repaired. But Emily accepted that growth and healing are never simple. Each time she chose to act with integrity, even toward those who doubted her motives, she felt just a little lighter, a step further from the coldness that had marked her exile. Looking in the mirror, Emily no longer saw either the orphaned child or the vengeful strategist. She saw someone learning the difficult art of balancing justice with mercy, legacy with renewal, ambition with compassion. In that space, in the tug of war between the bonds of kinship and the demands of principle, she found a new kind of peace. And as dawn broke over the city, Emily knew that while the struggle between family and justice would never fully end, it no longer defined her. She could honor both, forging a life richer than any old fortune, a life of her own making, shaped by love, resilience, and the courage never to stop questioning what was truly right. Ending and forgiveness. The struggle for justice had changed Emily Carter, remaking her from a wounded child into a formidable woman. And now, something else entirely. After years of bloodless corporate battles, of bitter reckonings and fragile family truces, a quiet had settled over her life. Yet, it was not the silence of victory she'd once imagined. Instead, it was the hush that follows storms, a moment for reckoning with what had been lost and with what, through sheer will, might still be salvaged. A fateful morning. The city beyond the penthouse window was bathed in dawn. Emily stood alone in the living room, coffee cooling in her hands. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying the events of the past months, the narrow passing of her plan in the boardroom, the phone calls from long-estranged relatives, the growing number of reconciliatory gestures from family and staff alike. Her choices had brought Carter Holdings into a new era. Yet the victory, now that it was complete, felt fragile, balanced on the trembling edge between retribution and redemption. She thought of her mother, Linda, whose presence in her life remained the single, unbroken thread, tying Emily to the past. Linda, whose resilience had inspired every step, whose values had stood as a quiet rebuke against hate. Emily wondered, as she watched the sun rise, what true closure would look like for them both. The decision to forgive. Forgiveness had never been simple in Emily's mind. It was not a transaction, nor a surrender. Rather, it was a conscious act, a letting go of the hope for a better past. As she worked through layers of old pain, she came to see forgiveness, not as excusing what the Carters had done, but as a refusal to let her own future be dictated by their choices. She would not allow the icy silence of the Carter estate or her grandmother's piercing judgments to remain the architects of her heart. One afternoon, she invited her mother for lunch at their favorite Brooklyn cafe. Sunlight spilled through the windows as Linda arrived, wrapped in the same soft warmth that had seen them through so many bitter winters. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Linda asked, after a comfortable silence had passed. Emily considered the question. "I think I'm ready to let the past be the past," she answered, voice steady. "There's still so much anger in that family, but I can't carry my share anymore. It's time to give myself and you a truly clean beginning." Her mother smiled, a little sadly. "Forgiveness isn't weakness, Emily. It's setting yourself free, making amends." In the weeks that followed, Emily made a deliberate effort to open small, meaningful channels for reconciliation. She penned handwritten letters, not emails or memos, or curt executive notes, but genuine letters, to each member of the Carter family. In them, she acknowledged past pain, described her hopes for a different future, and asked for nothing in return but honesty. Some letters were answered with gratitude, others with hesitance, and some with silence. But the act itself was transformative. Emily was moving, finally, on her own terms. She reached out beyond the family as well. Former staff from the Carter estate, who had been kind but powerless, received invitations to lunch. She visited old haunts in Brooklyn with her mother, not to rekindle grudges, but to thank those who'd been small lights in their days of hardship. She partnered Carter Holdings' philanthropic arm with neighborhood organizations that supported single mothers, newly arrived immigrants, and at-risk youth. In this work, the cycle of exclusion and pride that once defined the Carters began, slowly, to give way. The last conversation. Forgiveness required confronting those who had hurt her most. One autumn evening, Emily received a request for a private meeting from Agnes Carter. The message was short. "We should speak before the year is done." Emily arrived at the estate where it had all begun. The halls little changed, but somehow less imposing. Agnes was waiting in her study, no longer the unyielding matriarch, now softened by age and the visible strain of relinquished power. They sat across from each other. Emily waited. "You believe you've won," Agnes said finally, her voice betraying more weariness than venom. "This family is changed, and I don't know if we will ever understand each other." "I'm not looking for understanding," Emily replied, gently. "Only acceptance. That the old ways didn't work for any of us. That we can choose something better." A heavy silence passed between them. Agnes looked at her granddaughter, searching for cracks, for old anger. But Emily was unmoved. "You are my blood," Agnes said at last, softer than ever before. "I see now that what I did was rooted in fear, not tradition. I cannot undo it." Emily absorbed these words. For a long time, she had wanted an apology, a public reckoning. Now, the private admission of fear, the tenderness behind the mask, was enough. "I forgive you," she said, and for the first time, she meant it without reservation. A new chapter. The closing months of the year found Emily and Linda walking together, leaving behind the Carter building for good, letting the brisk city air sweep away the ghosts that once haunted them. Emily's work at Carter Holdings concluded with her securing a legacy of transparency, fairness, and purpose, not defined by family name, but by character. She stepped down from the board, content to watch a new, more equitable system take root without needing to control its every detail. With freedom no longer an elusive dream, Emily explored new paths, teaching business ethics at a local college, mentoring young entrepreneurs, and returning to her original manifesto, written so many years before in Brooklyn. The words now seemed less about vengeance and more about hope, a guidebook for resilience, for letting pain inform, but never rule her life. True forgiveness. Forgiveness, Emily learned, was iterative. There were days when anger surged, nights when old betrayals replayed in her mind. But as time passed, those moments had less hold. Forgiveness was not a singular act, but a continuous choice, a gentle, daily redirection of her heart toward peace. She and Linda made new memories. They traveled, marveled at small joys, and found in the quiet of ordinary days the fulfillment that had once seemed the exclusive privilege of others. For the first time, Emily felt wholly herself, not Carter by expectation, but Emily by intention. Legacy of compassion. Emily's legacy ultimately was not measured in the restored fortunes of Carter Holdings, nor in boardroom victories, but in the way she lived after the reckoning. With the humility to admit mistakes, the grace to forgive, and the wisdom to know when to let go and move forward. The city skyline, once a horizon of battlefields and ambition, now sparkled with possibility. As the sun rose on a new day, Emily took her mother's hand. Together, they stepped forward, leaving the past behind, not forgotten, but forgiven. The future, at last, belonged to them both.